for the opportunity to make my maiden contribution in this distinguished chamber. Congratulations to you on your selection to the chair. I must commend your fairness and your impartiality that you have displayed in this chamber. Madam Speaker, as we are always in the presence of the divine, it is important that we never forget that we did not arrive here by chance. We must thank Almighty God for providing the inspiration, faith, and guidance to offer ourselves a service to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Let me sincerely thank the thousands of constituents who voted on September 7th, 2015, and through the democratic process gave me a mandate to represent their interests and aspirations for the next 5 years in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Let me also thank my wife, my family, my relatives, my associates for embracing me and for giving me the impetus and warm support in my quest towards serving the people of the constituency of Mayaro. Madam Speaker, let me also express my gratitude to my dear political leader, the Honorable Kamala Prasad Bisesa, for reposing that utmost confidence in me, becoming a part of the United National Congress team in this 11th Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I take with sincerity of purpose my oath to serve in this Parliament, and I look forward to your guidance, direction, and experience to bear upon the resourceful, analytical, patriotic presentations of which I will seek to undertake in the various debates, motions, and in the general work of this House during my tenure in this most scrutinized chamber. To the member for Moruga Tableland, congratulations on your maiden speech. I too live in a constituency that I represent, and I share every concern that you have, because the issues are similar. I trust that the attention that Moruga will be given, it will be shared to the people of the constituency of Mayaro. Madam Speaker, I spent the last few days sitting in this chamber, listening attentively to all contributions made by the members and honorable ministers in this House. As a first-time member of this Parliament, I am indeed excited to be part of the most important team in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, permit me to quote my 13-year-old daughter when my family came to pick me up on Saturday evening, and I quote, "Daddy, are you for real? I heard nothing, I learned nothing, and I am disappointed. Aren't you all wasting time?" This is my 13-year-old daughter telling me that. Madam Speaker, I was tempted to agree with her, but I soon realized that I may be digging a hole for myself and putting our noble profession in the doghouse. But this conversation with her is not unique. There is a raging battle on social media regarding the conduct of parliamentarians within the national community. Honorable Minister of Communications, I tell you today, there will be no other media than social media in the near future. Social media is turning out to be a game changer. It is the new battlefield. Be wary, be cautious. Madam Speaker, at each arrival in this building, I feel an overwhelming sense of pride as I walk from the car park to this building. When I enter, I am greeted by police officers, many of whom offer a polite salute. These men and women gave me the highest form of respect, Madam Speaker. Then as I come to this chamber, I am overwhelmed by the quality of the parliamentary staff. Yes. They are absolute professionals. Madam Speaker, I then ask, why am I being offered this level of respect and attention by these very same men and women in this building? Is it because I walked my constituency, made promises and won an election? Madam Speaker, is that sufficient to warrant the level of service and respect that I am given? I don't think so, Madam Speaker. But I can offer a theory. The men and women in this parliament allow us into this building each day because they see us as the authors of their future. They see people whom they have elected to legislate a future for themselves and their children. We have locked their proverbial necks for the next 5 years. They have no other choice than to offer themselves and their service. But they ask for only one thing, Madam Speaker, that we must come to this chamber and chart a way forward for our nation to grow and prosper. Madam Speaker, I have yet to experience that pride of sitting in the highest court of our land, sadly. The attitude and behavior of our parliamentarians are leaving a bitter taste in the mouths of our citizens across the board, on both sides. Madam Speaker, I do not think we are earning the respect of the people in this building, much less Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I want to earn that respect, not demand it from them, neither have it offered to me free of charge. On Saturday, Madam Speaker, we were so busy pounding away at each other that we forgot, or perhaps we didn't care, that there were children in the audience. I'm afraid to venture even a thought of what was going through their minds during that presentation. Madam Speaker, if you'd allow me to talk on an issue that has made national headlines. We in charge now. My question, Madam Speaker, is in charge of what? It cannot be this house, Madam Speaker, because I know you're in charge of this house. It cannot be my house, because my wife is in charge of my house. And I'm sure it cannot be me, because the Lord is in charge of my life. But Madam Speaker, I wish to share with the Honorable Member for Tobago West through you what Tobago West is in charge of. Tobago West, you're in charge of a tourism sector that has been handicapped by a weak and dysfunctional national tourism plan. Tobago West, you are in charge of a sector that is disjointed and disconnected from horizontal and vertical industries. Tobago West, you are in charge of technocrats who have never seen community tourism as a diversification strategy. Our national plan has always circled around accommodation and airlift for the past 20 years. The world tourism market has moved towards the experience economy. Adventure tourism is where the global industry has gone, Madam Speaker. The Honorable Minister of Finance is still talking airlift and accommodation in 2016. Tobago West, you are in charge of a failed ideology. And that didn't start in 2010, mind you. That is what you are in charge of. So please, you deal with that. Okay? Thank you. Madam Speaker, conversely, I wish to remind members opposite that we, on this side, I like to remind them what we are in charge of. We are in charge of ensuring that the government remains accountable to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We are in charge of examining every detail of government expenditure and reporting to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We are in charge of bringing legitimate expectations of our constituents to this Parliament. We are in charge of reminding honourable members of the government that every action or lack thereof will be monitored and scrutinised over the term of their administration. You see, Madam Speaker, we know, the people of Trinidad and Tobago know the PNM. In 2007, the People's National Movement had one of the largest majorities in Parliament. And within 3 years, they crumbled under the weight of corruption, nepotism, cronyism. It sounds very familiar, very, very familiar. But permit me to actually start the budget debate, since I haven't heard any debating so far over the last 3 days. And to be able to do that, I want to predicate my position on an opinion given in the Trinidad and Tobago Express on Monday, 12th of October by Mr. Michael Harris, and I quote, "I am afraid I cannot join the chorus of commentators who have been singing the praises of the budget presented last Monday by the Finance Minister. As far as I am concerned, far from being a good budget or a just and courageous budget, what the Minister presented last Monday was a smorgasbord of contradictory measures, lacking in coherence and vision, and serving only to make it more certain that ours shall be a painful reckoning." And I just want to repeat that last two words, Madam Speaker. A painful reckoning. He goes on, "How are we going to reconcile and bring into balance a $63 billion budget of expenditure versus $41 billion of revenue?" The question comes up as to, well, what is the strategy? There must be a strategy when you have such a large, wide margin in terms of your deficit. This is the strategy as explained by Mr. Michael Harris in that same article. And I quote, "This is what the Finance Minister has to say about that. Over the next 6 months, we plan to hold a series of consultations with all the main stakeholders and with the country at large on the state of the economy and on the financial challenges and opportunities we face as a country." Yep, that is it. That is the strategy. That cannot be a strategy, Madam Speaker. So as I predicated my understanding of the budget, and I agree with Mr. Michael Harris here, I wish to focus some aspects of the Minister of Finance presentation as it relates to the agriculture, food security, food production, and its interconnectivity with tourism and information and communications technology. Madam Speaker, it is imperative that our national policies are predicated, adherent, and in sync with the United Nations Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals 2015-2030, or else we run the risk of swimming against the tide and reinventing the wheel every time there is a change in government. Madam Speaker, to go straight into the budget statement, under the heading Agriculture, page 24, and I quote, "We must reverse the decline in agricultural production and create a strong, modern, prosperous and competitive agricultural sector," end quote. Madam Speaker, how do we achieve these measures? Is it by drastically reducing the allocation in the sector from $1.3 billion to $831 million with a developmental budget of only $156 million? How can you commit less than 20% of the budgetary allocation to development? How can a $500 million reduction in the allocation signal any government's intention of creating a strong, modern, prosperous and competitive agricultural sector, Madam Speaker? This administration policy states an intention for growth, but their action speaks to suppression and stagnation. Talking agriculture will not move the sector forward, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Honorable Minister of Finance went on to state in his presentation, "We will do so by enhancing public sector investment and encouraging private investment in agriculture, in particular agrotechnology and the creation and modernization of agribusiness infrastructure." Well, Madam Speaker, while the appropriation bill can be a policy document for any administration, its deliverables must speak to a strategic policy which ultimately dictates the outcome. I have looked through the allocations for development in the industry, and I would like to bring to your attention some glaring inconsistencies. under the developmental program, there is no specific item or projects for private sector investments. Where are the incentives to attract and encourage more corporate entities into areas such as greenhouse farming? In my own constituency of Mayaro, Repsol has been leading community groups towards greenhouse farming projects, which have been very, very successful, Madam Speaker, in small scales. Isn't it about time that the state takes affirmative action to create larger scale opportunities in greenhouse farming? Madam Speaker, another issue that is affecting my constituency, and it would have made a lot of headlines a couple months ago, is the sargassum seaweed. We're talking about developmental projects here, and the sargassum seaweed phenomena is expected to be a most frequent visitor to our shores as we grapple with global warming. It's going to be a visitor every year. This has a detrimental impact to the livelihood of our fishermen. There's a gentleman who lives in Ottawa, his name is Clive Mentor, he's a good friend of mine. He calls me every day, Mr. Parry, what are we going to do about this sargassum, boy? It hampering we can't go and fish, the nets are getting damaged. And all we're doing so far, and I guess is what we can do, is clean up the beaches, make sure the pathways and so on are clean. But that is not the solution. Why has not this administration looked at opportunities in funding public-private sector investments in fishing communities like Mayaro to invest in new technologies in inland fishing, inland salt and freshwater fishing? The very same fisher folks who are being hampered by the sargassum seaweed can be trained in operating these new farms, working in these new farms. Madam Speaker, India and Australia is leading the way in developing these technologies associated in the sector. One would then ask, as I've been asked by other people in the fishing industry, well, if we put inland farms and so on, what happens to our boats? What happens to our nets? It's a lot of capital infrastructure. And that solution is simple, Madam Speaker. We live in an experience economy. As I've mentioned about our tourism sector, in Mayaro, if we can't fish, we can sell the experience of fishing, Madam Speaker. There are people who come to Mayaro, and I know there's one young man who has a little boat. He doesn't do too much of fishing, but he charges $1,200 or $1,500 to take 3 people out and spend the day fishing just for the experience. They may not catch anything, but they love the experience. So this is how we must interconnect some of our solution to drive this country forward, but I'm not seeing that in the developmental projects, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there is no clear indication of items for agricultural investment in agrotechnology. In all modern agricultural economies, the use of ICT is critical, and I was able to view last night on the Parliament channel, because I missed the end of your presentation, Honourable Minister of Public Administration, where you spoke about the use of ICT in agriculture. So I'm heartened to know that you will be giving it some consideration. If you would allow me, Madam Speaker, to draw a simple example. For 66 years, Israel has been in the forefront of originating and utilizing new forms of farming. Such innovations make creative use of developments like satellite imagery, information technology, and geospatial tools, allowing large and small-scale farmers to better track harvest, manage resources to promote long-term sustainability. Then, if that is so, where is our developmental budget for Centeno and our other research development organizations in Trinidad and Tobago? So if we are serious about diversification and making agriculture a more prominent feature in our strategy, why are we not investing? Why not investing in our research organizations, giving them money to find new ways and new methods to push agriculture forward in Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, under the developmental budget again, because I need to look at the developmental budget, because recurrent is to pay salaries and staff and building and current and so on. So I will be focusing on that developmental budget, Madam Speaker. There's an allocation under a heading called agribusiness industry and other enterprises. I don't know what that means, but I'm just looking at the dollar value. It's $1 million. Now, if I'm to suppose that means a developmental budget for agribusiness industry and enterprises meaning business, then $1 million sounds pretty weak, pretty shallow, and I do not know what you can use $1 million for in that broad area, which is an important area. It seems like mere pittance, Madam Speaker, if we want to seriously drive the agricultural sector in this country. There's another item that has raised some queries for me, and it's under a heading called Rice Development Program. $1 million again. Every single citizen in this country eating rice. We are importing large amounts of rice from Guyana, but yet, in a time like this, when we have to move away from the energy business in terms of our primary source of income, we are investing $1 million. $1 million for rice farming. The rice farmers in Saki, Trace, Navet, and Ecclesville would really like to know what part of that development is earmarked for them and why. Why are they interested, Madam Speaker? Saki, Trace, and Navet produced over 50 acres of rice at a super yield of over 4,000 pounds per acre. That is more than any other location in any of the other rice areas in Trinidad and Tobago. I think they are deserving of a lot of these development and fund. But again, I'm just looking at the drive as stated in the budget statement to what it is under the developmental budget. So I leave that up to the viewers and the listeners of this channel and the people of Trinidad and Tobago to make that decision. Madam Speaker, it is worth noting that it was the partnership government who made a concerted attempt to revitalize the local rice industry. And it was the partnership government that enabled the environment to secure local rice production targets of 50% of total rice consumption by 2018. The partnership government also resuscitated over 580 acres for rice cultivation under the government's commercial large farm program. The partnership government also facilitated the importation of commercial certified seeds from Guyana to ensure sustained and quality production. Madam Speaker, I would also like to discuss another line item I saw in the developmental program, which I was very happy to see. It's called the Agricultural Youth Apprenticeship Program. $3 million was allocated in order to set up a training workshop assessment center for the agricultural labor, micro and small agribusiness development. I applaud this initiative, providing there is a genuine trust in that direction. Madam Speaker, it is imperative that the youth constituency be integrated in all aspects of policy planning and implementation so that the real transformation of agriculture can take shape in terms of rebranding, market appeal, and for greater incentives for young farmers and the agribusiness entrepreneurs to the use of ICT. Madam Speaker, for these measures to become fully attractive to the youth population, we must embark upon a consolidated and concerted program of careers in agriculture, from the primary schools and into the communities, with a blitz on social media. This proposed measure I just spoke of, Madam Speaker, goes much further than what the Minister of Finance touted in his reintroduction of the awards of Best Kitchen Garden in schools. These are just a few examples of where the developmental strategy is in conflict with the opening remarks of the Honorable Minister of Finance, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the intention of the Minister to remove and exempt duties on imports into the agricultural sector sounds noble. However, all I ask is that strong monitoring systems be enforced to ensure that the savings is in fact passed on by the suppliers to the farmers and fisher folks, so that they can also pass on the savings to the consumers, who should be the ultimate beneficiary. Alternatively, Madam Speaker, I am sure the farmers may have readily accepted a cash subsidy rebate on all feeds and chemical products during the non-harvesting season as an option, whilst the farmers wait on their harvest to grow so that they can produce to feed this nation. A subsidy cash rebate on feed and chemicals and so on may have been able to put food on their tables for their families. So it's just some food for thought, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Appropriation Bill 2015-2016 fails to address one of the main components of a robust and energized agricultural sector, that is labor. There is a paradox existing in our society today, Madam Speaker. Each day on social media, I read of people being laid off at several regional corporations, layoffs in the URP program, and CPEP teams being terminated. But this is where the paradox lies, Madam Speaker. And I will draw this example if you would permit me. The Review of the Economy 2015 has stated that pineapple production has decreased dramatically over the last fiscal year from 887,000 kilograms to 458,000 kilograms. This was mainly due as a result of less acreage and under-cultivation due to a labor shortage. So on one hand, due to economic constraints, our safety network programs have to be culled, it has to be cut. But yet, we cannot seem to find a way to move our surplus human capital to more productive opportunities. Perhaps in agriculture may be a good place to start. Now I do hope that the components of CPEP and URP that has moved under the Ministry of Agriculture will be put to productive use in assisting farmers in meeting their labor obligations, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, allow me to share with you also an example where the policy directive for downstream industries for the pineapple farmers, where is it? Where is the investment for research into the potential of fiber extraction from the skin of pineapple for the manufacture of clothing? This diversification trust is being pursued in Southeast Asia as we speak. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, you can purchase these high-quality clothing on Amazon.com, but I know we are having a bit of challenges with online shopping, so I tread carefully in asking people to go and shop more. But as a bit of a suggestion to the Minister of Finance, I read what Argentina has been doing in order to slow down the appetite for online shopping, thus controlling a bit of the foreign currency consumption. Now, I'm not saying to do this, it's just a bit of idea. He can research it. The Honorable Minister of Finance can research it. But in Argentina, rather than fight a battle with tariff and trade agreements, they put a little tax on the shippers, people who are bringing the goods to your door. And in good format with the policy of this administration to raise revenue, that $22 billion shortfall, tax may just be well in line to a strategy. So, Madam Speaker, that is an area where I feel that we are very, very weak in terms of the budget, in terms of the budget statement and the direction, in terms of diversification, downstream policies. It is not making sense. It is not connecting to the preamble of the budget statement. Madam Speaker, besides the pineapple farmers in the Morogo Tableland area, the same approach applies to the watermelon farmers in Kernaham and Cascadoo and Manzanilla, who suffer from the same labor shortages and heavy losses in their wholesale and retail markets. How are we addressing that? Our budget statement, our developmental initiatives based on the nice, pretty yellow books that were given to me, nothing is speaking to that, Madam Speaker. There are many byproducts, and the potential for agro-processing spin-offs from the watermelon, which we can pursue in terms of investing in developmental strategies. And I'll give you an example again, Madam Speaker. There are often melon crop failures where hundreds of thousands of pounds are destroyed. However, with the proper investment in research and development, 3 agro-waste products, namely watermelon rind, watermelon skin, and the extracts from watermelon seed, were all investigated for their corrosion inhibition properties for mild steel. These extracts inhibited the acid-induced corrosion of mild steel. What that means, Madam Speaker, this is a downstream industry that is waiting to be researched and found to find solutions in the maintenance and reliability industry. Now, Madam Speaker, I found these things with a simple glance through Google, through the internet, to find solutions. Why aren't we speaking? Why aren't our budget? Why aren't our financial strategy over the next 5 years, and which I assume should have been factored into the budget statement? Why aren't we speaking to those things, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, the Finance Minister gives the impression that this administration is going to lead the transformation in agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago. But I think the Honourable Minister, is 5 years too late. Much has already been done in the agricultural sector, and I trust that this administration will continue with greater urgency under the current economic climate. Madam Speaker, if you would allow me just to revisit a bit of what the People's Partnership Administration accomplished over the last 5 years in terms of agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago. There was a revised and comprehensive agricultural incentive program with a multitude of standard and acceptable benefits for the farming community to ensure increased production and conservation of the environment. Madam Speaker, the farming and fisherfolk communities of my constituency welcomed these incentives in fiscal 2013-2014 alone, saw the processing and approval of over 3,500 applications at a cost of over $19 million. We expanded assistance and compensation in a timely manner to farmers and fisherfolks after floods and natural disasters. We approved construction of packing houses to provide processing facilities which ensured that markets were sustained due to sharp increases in commodity prices. We offered more technical support and marketing advice through NAMDEFCO, Madam Speaker. We built and refurbished a number of fish landing facilities and plants to fisherfolk communities which were neglected for decades. While on this matter, it is my hope that whatever the design flaws and challenges that exist in the Guayaguayari fish landing facility be sorted out in the fastest possible time. Madam Speaker, we stabilized the food inflation rate. When we came into office in 2010, the food inflation rate was 29%. And as we demitted office, this was reduced to single-digit figures of at least 8%. Madam Speaker, from 2010 to mid-2014 alone, the Agricultural Development Bank processed and approved at least 400 grants at an estimated value of $100 million for agro-processing, ornamental fishery, food crops, forestry and livestock, etc. Madam Speaker, another critical element for our National Food Action Plan 2012-2015 was the implementation of a national perennial larceny squad to once and for all address the scourge of perennial larceny, which has plagued the agricultural sector for generations and which has impacted negatively on production levels. The perennial larceny squad, Madam Speaker, has provided extensive coverage across 4 divisional offices in Central, South, East and Northern districts, operating on a 24-hour basis with a manpower strength of over 100 officers. Through ADB Secure at the Agricultural Development Bank, loans were also guaranteed to farmers to cushion the impacts against perennial larceny. We also upgraded several agricultural district offices over the period. Madam Speaker, this brings me to the point that whilst the government has now seen the merits of decentralization in moving the Ministry of Agriculture to Central Trinidad, this move by itself will not in any way stimulate the agricultural sector. The Ministry's head office, as you would know, Madam Speaker, is responsible for policy and administration. So it is the district offices across the country which must continue to make the difference in improving customer care, technical support, and other logistical support for the agricultural stakeholders. However, Madam Speaker, I believe that the relocation of the ministry has more to do with political mobilization than decentralization. Madam Speaker, we cannot talk decentralization without a serious look at ICT. And again, having listened to the Honorable Minister of Public Administration last night, I am very heartened to see that in his statement, he spent some time speaking to ICT in the agricultural sector. So I trust that with his fervor and drive, that he will be able to deliver that area of the agricultural improvement. The proposed broadband deployment must go beyond social media access for our mobile citizens and school children. Our agricultural districts, our agricultural demonstration farms, and our breeding units must be interconnected to bring government services closer to the people, Madam Speaker. The development of rural communities should be looked at not just from the point of view of improved infrastructure, but with a broader goal of decentralization of services and the attraction of light manufacturing industries. The government should consider again special incentives where these involve job creation. The incentives should relate to the number of jobs created. These are just some of my suggestions, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the People's Partnership Administration had begun to review the role of the livestock sector in reducing the food import bill. We started the refurbishment and reconstruction of livestock breeding units throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, in Guayari, we reconstructed such a unit after more than 20 years of the facility being abandoned and neglected. Today, this new facility is fully operational, and it's having a sustained impact upon the revival and revitalization of livestock rearing in the community. The revival and sustenance of the livestock sector is also very crucial in the reduction of our towering food import bill as it relates to meat and dairy consumption. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance also spoke about security of land tenure, and it is now being accorded a high priority. And such lands will also now be delivered with access roads, drainage and irrigation systems. I would just like to repeat that, Madam Speaker. Security of land tenure is now becoming a high priority for this administration. That is because the historical record, Madam Speaker, will tell you that it is a tragic record with regards to the processing of agricultural leases for farmers. And this didn't start in 2010, Madam Speaker. We inherited an outdated system which had become very indifferent, insensitive, and unrealistic as it relates to leases. There is a backlog of applications, Madam Speaker, which spans generations of farmers. And just as the generations of farmers have spanned, so too the technical officers. So my grandfather would have spoken to the technical officer's grandfather, my father talked to his father, and then I am talking to the new. So it's a generational issue in terms of these leases, Madam Speaker. My government began the thrust to overhaul the systems, but red tape and bureaucracy has slowed us down. I therefore ask the Minister to look at ways of speeding up that process, especially now as we want to drive the diversification and our agricultural sector forward. So again, in true style as a government in waiting, Madam Speaker, I would like to suggest to the Honourable Minister of Agriculture that in order to expedite the processing of land tenure for farmers who are in the ministry's database, but they do not have the security of land tenure, they can be offered a 5-year lease. So at least they can use that temporary lease for commercial banking and ADB purposes, so they can get financing for their equipment and their seedlings and their properties and so on. However, the farmers can now be given an opportunity to fast-track the process by surveying the land themselves. Let them pay for it. Let them pay the fees for the surveying. So in that way, it would release the ministry from that additional burden and at the same time speed up the processes. Madam Speaker, this was told to me by a rice farmer in Sakiutres Nugget. This man may not have had secondary education, but he has a lot of common sense. And I promise that as I stand in this parliament today, I will offer the suggestion to the Honourable Minister, and I hope that he takes it into consideration. Madam Speaker, security of tenure is fundamental to farmers in securing finance, credit and capital, and towards ensuring that there is a stable environment for valued production levels. Madam Speaker, at the end of all these measures, incentives and developmental programs, the big question still remains: what are the targets for reducing our overwhelming food and import bill, which staggers at over $4 billion? How will the exemption of duties and taxes on imports impact upon food inflation and food security, increase in yields and quality production? What are the long-term investments needed to realize significant levels of agricultural diversification? What are the timelines set to achieve these measures? Madam Speaker, these are the critical questions that have not been answered. They have not been answered in terms of the budget presentation, and these questions are critical in terms of how we move forward as a country in handling our agricultural diversification trust and being able to feed ourselves, because we are not disconnected from global issues. We are not disconnected from what's happening in China, in Asia, in terms of wheat and various type of challenges they are having in their agricultural sector, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to hereby implore the Honourable Minister of Agriculture to continue the aggressive processing of agricultural leases started under the People's Partnership Government. There are several flagship projects within the Mayaro constituency that I wish to highlight at this time, Madam Speaker. The Rio Claro Mayaro blocks, which have over 150 farmers, were issued their leases after decades of waiting. There are many more blocks that has to be processed. I trust that the Minister would look at these blocks and assist our farmers to get their leases in a very, very short time. We would like to see, in terms of my constituency, Madam Speaker, a continuation of upgrades and rehabilitation of agricultural access roads, bridges, and the drainage program, which has been in good swing over the last 3 or 4 years. Areas such as Guppy Hill, Sakiutres, Mahabal Singh, Legion Road, Casabon Trace are all ready and waiting for upgrades. And Madam Speaker, these are all areas where we have farmers, they have acres of their crops, and they are having challenges to get some of these access roads. The process was started, and we would like to see some continuance in the constituency. The people of the constituency of Mayaro, Madam Speaker, would also like to see a completion and a finalization and bring into operation the Guayagwari Fish Landing Facility in the shortest possible time. We would also like to see the restart of full operations of the Ottawa Heritage Market, which was abandoned after more than 15 years and which the partnership government refurbished in 2012. We would also like to see a realignment and expansion of the Mayaro and Rio Claro market, which are grossly underserved, undersized, and we'd hope that some attention can be paid to these two areas. Additional docking and mooring facilities for our fishermen in the Ottawa catchment areas. The development of a Mayaro Rio Claro wholesale market for our farmers. The re-establishment of a branch of the Agricultural Development Bank in Rio Claro to service the needs of our fishermen and farmers from Guayagwari to Beach to Pool Valley. The establishment of a poultry farmers cooperative where our pluck shop owners can engage the state in a public-private partnership to establish large poultry farms and then resell to pluck shops throughout the constituency. Madam Speaker, I also look towards for a report from the Coastal Erosion Unit of the Ministry of Works on finding out a way forward how far the assessment has reached in terms of dealing with the coastal erosional problem that stretches from Guayagwari to Manzanilla. I also look forward to the complete outfitting of the Mayaro fire station as early as possible. We have had 2 fires in the last week where homes were destroyed, and there is still no fire stations at that fire appliance at that station, Madam Speaker. There does not appear to be any provision, Madam Speaker.
I'm on my legs, please. Honorable Member for Mayaro, your 45 minutes have been spent. You're entitled to 10 minutes, within which I expect you to wrap up. But before I call upon you, I would just like to ask honorable members, in your effort to comply with Standing Order 53(1)J, which relates to your electronic devices, you may wish to consider not having them in such close proximity to your speakers. We are getting some feedback.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know the noise came from across the other side when I mentioned about the fire station, but this is what I spoke about early on in terms of our conduct. Because the important issue here that is important to the constituents, Madam Speaker, is that there are no fire trucks in the fire station and 2 houses were burnt. That is the serious matter that I am here to deal with, not the nonsense. I must also say, Madam Speaker, in examining the expenditure reports, there is no appropriation for those appliances. So I would like to ask the Honourable Minister of National Security during his delivery if he can speak to that, if so be. It will be a tragedy if nothing happens in terms of outfitting that station before the year is over. There's a lot of idle grounds in rural communities that can be looked at in terms of increasing housing. There is a serious housing issue in our constituency. I know the demand outstrips the supply, Madam Speaker. I would hope that the new Minister of Rural Development looks at those things and be able to provide some more housings in the constituency. Madam Speaker, to wind up, I would like to congratulate all the new members of this Parliament. I am sure, like many of you, our families, our parents, our grandparents, and our ancestors are very proud of this bold new step that we have all taken. I also wish to remind honourable members that we represent the future of governance and politics in Trinidad and Tobago. We have a duty to change the way we conduct the business of Parliament. We have a responsibility to the 400,000 young persons to set the right example and lead this nation with pride, dignity, and integrity. I am sure the fact that this 11th Parliament consists of the most number of young persons in both the lower and upper houses, the viewership and the listenership of the Parliament channel will rival any prime-time cable TV channel in Trinidad and Tobago. In my household alone, I have added 3 young adults who would pass the Parliament channel straight. They are now glued onto it because I am here. We must never disappoint our audience, Madam Speaker, with a display unbecoming of the noble citizens that I know we are all in this House. On the other hand, Madam Speaker, I would like to make a plea to the seasoned MPs on both sides of this honourable House to set the right tone and atmosphere as we conduct the nation's business. Someone said on Friday or Saturday, I think it was banter across the floor, Madam Speaker, that the first-time MPs were children. Well, as the saying goes, I think perhaps it was the member for St. Augustine, but as the saying goes, children learn what they live. Treat us, the young MPs, as your children in this House. Lead by example. And together as one nation under God, we will be unstoppable, Madam Speaker. When we leave this House, Madam Speaker, we must leave as parliamentarians, not like a Juve ban with mud plastered all over us. Madam Speaker, thank you for this opportunity, and you have my commitment of the highest professional standards as I perform the work as a legislator for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call upon the member for Tanapuna.